Hello, everyone. I'm Scott Roen, and I work at American Express in our small business group. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the brand side of it and how brands and content come together. And I thought I would start off, hopefully we won't have technical difficulties. All right. Start off talking a little bit about the history of brands and content, and then talk a little bit about why I believe that we're entering a new phase that's really going to accelerate the innovation and transformation of brands and content. So, first off, the history. Any soap opera fans here in the house? All right, I think we got like 2 that admitted it, but I've seen a few others in here that I know you're lying. I put up As the World Turns because, well, first off, just to prove out that some of you guys are lying, I did a little research ahead of time. They've had as many as 10 million viewers in a given day. Okay, so this might be the minority here. And they are, I believe, the 2nd longest running TV show in history. So soap operas seem to have worked at least for a period of time. And as many of you know, P&G, Procter & Gamble, was behind this. So they had this problem back in the 1920s of trying to reach their target audience. Stay-at-home moms to buy soap and other goods that they have. That was their target. And they couldn't seem to figure out a way to access them, so they decided to use this new technology that was emerging called the radio. And they built up these soap operas first on the radio and then took advantage of this further innovation on TV in the 1950s. And it took off. And obviously, this was huge for their brand, but really created a whole industry. And they haven't stopped. P&G have just moved on to the newer innovation, the internet, and they now have a number of online assets they're building out from a content standpoint. I think Man of the House is the one I'm most familiar with, even though I don't really think I am the man of the house. And clearly their target has evolved a bit. Speaking of, anybody watch this show? Up All Night? All right, good. I'm not the only Will Arnett fan. Funny show, especially if you have kids. I got 2 girls under the age of 5, so I definitely feel like I live this lifestyle sometimes. But the reason why this is up here is you can see Apple down here. So whether it's P&G or Apple, these are brands that care deeply about content. P&G's case, they're actually building the content, producing the content, creating it. They've been doing it here in New York City, actually, since the beginning. Apple is probably one of the best examples of someone that has authentically inserted themselves within the story. Not necessarily creating the story, but care very much about it. And so why do brands like this care so much about content? Well, I was just reading this book, Roofed, but there are countless studies that show that that content and stories and the association with them drives more conversation about the brand, about the company, about the products and services, which builds relevance and ultimately sales. So I haven't really told any of you anything new. Content has been around for over a century, associated with brands. We care deeply as a brand myself about content and about what it does, ultimately driving sales. So what's going to change this? What's going to make this continue, but not in an evolutionary step, but actually pick up the pace and accelerate where we're going? And I think there are 3 core changes that are happening. So first, content creation has become faster, cheaper, and better. So I took over responsibility for Open Forum, American Express's small business content and community site, about 2 years ago. And since I came aboard, we've cut our expenses, our operating expenses, about in half. We have seen triple-digit growth, and I think our quality has gotten a lot better. And we've done this by taking advantage of a lot of open source technology, the reduction in costs of hosting, but also a lot of the new tools that are available, Contently, Percolate, and a number of others that we've worked directly with to allow us to identify and create really good content and then distribute it. So I think that this is going to continue, and probably continue even faster than we've seen before. Almost like a Moore's Law or some sort, where we see this continuing in an exponential factor. The second area is this emerging science, or at least understanding the science of sharing and community. So I talked about Paul Adams' book, Grouped, which does a really good job of essentially aggregating a lot of the intelligence out there on social behavior and community. But it's been really interesting to see how you can take a story or a message or a vision and be able to leverage some of these insights to really get it to cascade through your market. So in this case, we've taken advantage of this for quite some time, but a good example that American Express has used is this thing that we created called Small Business Saturday. Not sure how many people have heard of this, but it was about 3 years ago, a number of us were sitting around a conference room at American Express trying to think through how we can have a bigger impact on small businesses. And this idea was conceived of, there's Black Friday that focuses on big box, and there's Cyber Monday to help the internet. Why isn't there a day for small businesses, local businesses? So we created this day right after Thanksgiving, sandwiched between Black Friday and Cyber Monday. And we tried to get the word out, and we leveraged a lot of the social behavior to do so. 2 years later, this most recent Small Business Saturday, we had over 100 million people go out and shop small. So you just get a sense of the impact you can have, if you can get your story, if you can get your mission out there. And we didn't do this necessarily by the traditional means. So this is going to become more and more important. If you can get the right message and leverage the channels to get it out there, to get this kind of scale, this is what the brands like P&G were trying to do to begin with. And the third point that I think is really important is that it's this concept of reciprocal altruism has really been proven. And this concept here that we at American Express have been focusing on for quite some time now is that if you give something away for free without any expectation of getting anything back, that you get so much more. And so when you think about what we did with Small Business Saturday, we were not asking consumers to give us something. We weren't asking the merchants to do something. We weren't saying, go use your American Express card at a local business. We weren't saying, go shop at a business that accepts our card. We were just trying to say, go out there and do the right thing, support the local businesses, and didn't ask for anything in return. Same thing with Open Forum. Here is great content. Here's a community. Here's a place to learn from one another. We're not asking for anything in return. And the reality is what we found was that when we measured just about every single metric we could think of, Net Promoter Score, the spend on our network, loyalty, attrition, everything you could imagine a brand would care about, everything was up. And it's kind of obvious when you think about it. If you give something great away that people want and care about, and you don't ask for anything in return, they like it. And they will talk about it, and they will become more loyal to you. So when you think about these components coming together of creating that story, creating the content that your brand care about, doing it in an altruistic way, one that really has a mission behind it, and then leveraging the ability to reach such a large population in a cost-effective, fast way, this just seems like a no-brainer for brands going forward. So these are the pieces that I feel will push brands to take advantage of this. The content, the story that we care about, the ability to tie into community and get the message out, and ultimately this altruistic approach that a brand cares about. For Open, that's the brand of small business within American Express, the mission that we're focused on is helping entrepreneurs succeed. Right now, I don't think it's any surprise, but most entrepreneurs fail. In fact, 56% of businesses are out of business within 4 years. That's not good. It's not good for the entrepreneurs. It's not good for their local communities. It's not good for our national economy. And so when American Express is looking at the challenge that we're trying to overcome, we're trying to improve the success of entrepreneurs. And that's so much more inspiring as someone that works at a company like this to be able to, okay, if this is our mission, this is the story that we're getting behind, how do we create something around this? How do we get that story out? How can we have a bigger impact? And we've been able to do a lot more interesting things because of that. And as I said before, because we had this altruistic approach, because we went after it in a content and community-oriented way, we've actually been able to have business outcomes, not the purpose, but the business outcomes that are really driving our business forward. So that's a little bit about the history as I've seen it within the content world, and how American Express has been trying to take advantage of these things in an authentic way. And I'd be happy to answer any questions now or afterwards on how we as a company or as we've seen other brands take advantage of this. Looks like there's a mic going around as well.
Any questions?
Yep.
So when you use the word altruism there, it struck me as more of a marketing speak word. When you think of the psychology of persuasion, the Hare Krishnas in the 70s give you a rose, you don't have to give them anything back, but there is an expectation. And in fact, psychology will teach you it's double the return, right? So
Yes.
you guys are being smart, I think, about that. Was that your thinking going into it, or was there truly expectation that let's put this out there and we'll come back in some other way, or was there really...
So that's a really good point. We've learned as we've gone. Actually, this idea of reciprocal altruism is not a concept we named. It was actually, we're kind of doing it through a number of initiatives, more from a brand approach overall. And in doing more research and collaborating with other providers like P&G, we uncovered that there's an actual name and practice around this. So we didn't go out after this, and now that there's a name, it's easier to talk about it that way. But we have in some ways, the luxury of pursuing something more altruistically because within the small business world, we are the largest provider. American Express is about 4 to 5 times the size of our nearest competitor. And so our issue, even though it sounds altruistic, the reality is we have the largest share of the market, and the biggest problem is that our market tends to fail. Our customers go out of business within 4 years. So for us, even though it sounds very altruistic, and it is, the reality behind this is it does drive our business model. We truly need to help entrepreneurs succeed if we want our business to thrive. And so, yes, it's not us just going out and being nice, but that actually dovetails very well with our overall business.
Sort of like an insurance company giving you a free medical checkup, right?
Yeah, I haven't heard that analogy, but I'd be happy to take a free medical checkup, or maybe not. But yeah, very good point. Yes?
Hi. Is this on?
Yes.
Okay. Are you creating content internally through employees, or are you curating content from third-party publishers for your open forum?
Yeah, so a good question for those that couldn't hear was about how we're creating the content itself. Is it employee? Is it curated? Are we hiring it? It's actually a mix. So the vast majority of the content that we're creating and publishing through open forum is coming either from user-generated or people that we've identified as experts within the space that we know that entrepreneurs care about, whether it's cash flow or leadership or customer service, and we've brought them in to try to write for us in these categories to have conversations around this. There are times where it makes sense for an American Express employee to participate in the conversation or to lead a conversation or write a thought leadership piece, but the reality is most of it, by far, is done from non-American Express employees. Yeah?
Open forum has changed lives for a lot of years. How have you and your team... I was just saying that the open forum's evolved a lot over the years. There's been multiple launches, and how have you tracked effectiveness and listened to your audience and adapted your strategy over time?
Good question. So we have been monitoring how we've evolved over time through the traditional, metrics-driven approach. We've been assessing, the landscape as it's evolving, and the fortunate part about creating a community and a site like this is solicited or unsolicited, people give you feedback quite a bit. So we are proactively seeing it in the numbers, hearing people push what they like and what they don't like. and trying to take inspiration from others. I mean, the biggest thing for a big brand like ourselves and the biggest challenge that we've tried to overcome is this idea that today we're publishing around 10 to 15 articles and videos every day. And we're pushing new code at, probably every 3 weeks, give or take, depending on what's going on. And for a lot of you that are startups here, that probably sounds like a little or slow, but for a big brand, when you have the compliance and government affairs and legal and technology and privacy and security and every governing body that you could ever imagine wanting to review and evaluate and ponder and discuss, the title of every article, to get us to a point where we can actually move at a real pace, both on the content side, but even more difficultly, in a more difficult situation, the technology behind it has been a real challenge, but I feel like we've got a rhythm now. And so we're just trying to get the feedback in as quickly as we can. We test a lot. And there's been plenty of areas where we haven't gotten it right, and we're just trying to rework it. Other questions? Yeah.
Hello. I was wondering, what are your thoughts on user-generated content for a brand?
So it's a broad question. I think it's really important for brands to embrace user-generated content, largely because brands have a hard time finding their voice, and they also have a hard time making sure that either they're authentic or they come across as authentic. So the easiest way to overcome both of those things is to let the users actually have a voice and communicate. It's not easy to allow that to happen within a big company, but you can overcome that. The challenge that we've always struggled with is, how do you encourage or allow anonymous behavior versus known behavior, and how much do you moderate discussion? And as a government-regulated organization, these are real issues. As American Express is a financial services company, we have to consider these things very seriously. But I think it's pretty tough in this environment to be in content and community without fully embracing user-generated. Did I hit on? Yeah, okay. Yep.
I have a question that's the exact opposite of that. What are your thoughts about brands using licensed third-party?
Okay, so brands, the question was around my thoughts on brands using licensed content. Every brand's going to have a different objective. I have no issue with that whatsoever. And in some cases, that can make a lot of sense based on the objective. Ultimately, I think what we've found is having a mix of content is it's a portfolio, and you've got to figure out what the right mix is and what percentage of that mix. We have content on our site through different partnerships that we don't produce. So for example, we have a relationship with MSNBC, and through media buys, they give us access to certain content that's very relevant. So we're happy to take it and publish it on our site. But if all we were was a feed of MSNBC content, we're not really serving a greater need. But it's really trying to figure out what that right balance is. And we're constantly experimenting. I'm not sure we've got the mix perfectly right now, but you monitor your flow and you adjust accordingly. Yep, question back there.
Hello. You just made a comment about this woman's question, and you made a suggestion that authenticity was important. I'm curious of how you define authenticity in a social media context, and at the risk of asking a totally facile question, why is it important for a company like American Express to have an authentic voice?
So I smile because we talk a lot about this. We were talking about this on the car ride up, how it is so obvious, but at the same time challenging to find that authentic voice. And I think it's important because one of the reasons why you're creating content is to engage and to offer something up and to be relevant. And one of the things that we've found is to be relevant, sometimes you need to be mildly incongruent with the thoughts people have of you, because at least as a company like ourselves, American Express has been around 162 years. So there aren't many people that don't know American Express. And that is a good thing, but it can work against us at times in the sense that they think they know us, and then many times they don't think we're relevant for what they need for, something for. So we're trying to be authentic, but we're also trying to figure out how we engage people in a conversation that they're going to want to embrace. And that's a tough balance. As a company with 65,000 employees and a 162-year history and many business units, zeroing in on your personality and the type of information you want to share and your point of view is a delicate balance. And that's why oftentimes you'll see people start leveraging some of these tools to help people find their voice. I mentioned one of them before. Percolate is a software tool that we use that actually helps us, when we're thinking about what we want to post and where we want to engage and what is going to be relevant, we actually leverage that tool to help us find what's important to have a conversation around. It's not hard when you do it in a campaign necessarily, and you're putting out a TV commercial once a quarter or whatever it is, but when you're publishing content all day, every day, it can be tough. Yes?
American Express that you're actually getting customers versus just getting, how do you, that makes sense?
Getting customers versus what?
How are these efforts to create content? How do you show your parent company that you're actually resulting in customers?
Yeah, so this is one of those discussions I have almost every day is, clearly open forum has been successful for us, same with Small Business Saturday. It's engaged a huge audience, people love it for lots of different reasons, but in the end, people internally, finance department or different acquisition groups, push to say, well, what value is it driving? And so the way we've been able to address this is really there's this spectrum, and the spectrum I call it a spectrum of believability. On one side, which is very clear, how much hard dollars are coming in as a result of this. So in some cases, we have paid sponsorships on open forum. People are writing us checks, and no one can debate the value that's created there. Then there's card acquisition for us, where people actually engage in the content. And they're like, you know what? I like what American Express is doing. I think I should get a card, and we can track that, of course. Then there's loyalty. And loyalty is where it becomes a little bit more difficult because we've been able to do studies to show that when people engage on American Express open forum site, that they actually are they use our products more. We can see how they spend, when they came on site, and then where they spent and how they spent. We can show a material impact on their loyalty to us. There's then this discussion of attribution, and we get into a lot of details where that believability of our impact there becomes a little less clear. And then as you move all the way to that right side, you start talking about brand metrics and net promoter score and how do you value an increase in net promoter score. And that, again, attribution and just the ability to put a dollar value on someone's affinity to you becomes more and more difficult. There's definitely methods, and we use them, a lot of brands do. But you look across that spectrum, all you really end up having to do is show enough across that spectrum to offset any costs that we're putting into it, where people are like, okay, I got it. You guys are way more covering your costs on this thing, and you're clearly doing some interesting things. Go forth. But it is a constant discussion, and I'd be lying to say there aren't skeptics of the stuff farther out on the end of the spectrum. Okay, so I'm being told no more questions, but I'll be around, so if anyone has any additional questions, thank you. Really good discussion. Thanks.